Welcome to Major Label Debut. This is the podcast about major label debuts. I'm Graham Wright. A friend of mine goes down to Nashville a lot, Nashville, Tennessee, and he taught me a saying that I'd never heard before, the Nashville no, which is when, instead of someone telling you no, they just kind of leave you on red. Or maybe they say, oh yeah, we'll try and schedule that down the road a ways. And then you never hear from them again. Either way, it dawns on you pretty quickly that whatever it is you're pitching or seeking is not going to happen. You just got the Nashville no. I can tell you from experience that, like many things that originated in Nashville, the Nashville no has been widely adopted throughout the music business. And that's Nashville, right? It's synonymous with the music biz. It's synonymous with the country music business. You've heard of the Grand Ole Opry, you've heard of the Ryman Auditorium, you've heard of Tim McGraw and Taylor Swift, and the list goes on. And it's a reputation that's well-deserved, but it's not what we're here to talk about today. Because even when a city becomes so thoroughly identified with one part of one art form, it continues to be a city, and there's still people making all kinds of art there. It's just that art then tends to get overshadowed by the mothership. Which brings me to Michael Eades. Michael, who is our guest on the show today, is kind of a patron saint of the Nashville indie music scene, which is a part of the Nashville scene that maybe is not as associated with Music City, USA. I know that for years I kind of thought when Tokyo Police Club would play Nashville and we wouldn't draw that big a crowd, I would tell myself, well, it's because people only listen to country music here. Why would they come to an indie rock show? Turns out I was wrong. And Michael Eades is a man at the center of the scene that has been there all along. Michael runs an amazing record label called YK Records. He's also one of those guys who got in on the ground floor of the internet. Michael has been running blogs and creating online communities for basically as long as those have been things. And I gotta say, in a time when it is very easy to be pessimistic about how the internet has affected music and the music business, Michael has an outlook that I found surprisingly positive and very encouraging and pretty inspiring. We talked about all those things. We talked about more things than that. And here now is that conversation. It's a hearty Nashville yes from me to a true blue friend of the pod and a friend of art in general. Here's me talking to Michael Eades. Michael, I'm so thrilled to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on our podcast.
I am flattered to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I have many questions for you. You have lived and worked a varied and interesting life and career. And I was listening this morning to, I believe it's the first episode of your YK World podcast, where you sort of outline with admirable economy your entire life story up to the moment you started the podcast, essentially in like 42 minutes. It's very impressive. And you mention in there an origin story is the best kind of story. And I did note that you have got in on a lot of ground floors, including very near to the ground floor of podcasting. But I've been thinking a lot about, in the world of music, in the world of bands, novelty and first records and new bands. And, you know, we all have heard the old saw that you have your whole life to make your first record and then only 8 months to make your second. And sometimes I wonder to myself, gee, should everyone always have their whole life to make their record? And is that always, is every band's best record their first? And the answer, of course, is not really, but I want to get your thoughts on novelty in music. I guess as a label owner first, and then as a fan and ground floor getter in or honor second.
Novelty. Yeah, I mean, I can speak to like the first record thing. I mean, I think that old adage is true, that you do have a very long time to work those things out. The best bands get better with time. I can very specifically remember getting a band's first record in college, a local band, and it confused me so much. And I was not ready for it. It was very influenced by things that I was not familiar with. So when I listened to it, I was just very lost. And that band over time has just gotten better and better, and their sound and style has changed. And their last record was probably the best record they ever made. So like, that's what you want to hear.
Yeah.
One anecdote about novelty in music that comes to mind for me is there is a producer in town in Nashville named Jeremy Ferguson. He has a studio called Battle Tapes. That is an endorsement for him because I'm a fan. Big fan of him. He has often talked about how he loves to work with younger bands because they are not set in their ways with feeling like a thing has to be a certain way. They're way more open to experimentation and new ideas and trying new things out. And things are new and interesting to them. So like you could bring them a certain patch or a technique of recording and they've just never thought of it before. And it's like something new and interesting to try. Whereas a lot of bands, maybe on their fifth record or sixth record, they've done it so much and they've played so much. They aren't interested in that and they aren't willing to sort of bend their ideas a little bit. So it's always cool to work with people that are willing to push themselves and their techniques. It just seems to happen a lot with first records.
I wonder if I'm just trying to sort of relitigate my own mixed feelings about, having just done our big farewell tour with Tokyo Police Club. And that's an occasion for a lot of reflection on the music. And we were lucky enough that most of our records had their fans, but there was always the really strong contingent of people who simply didn't think it ever got any better than the first record. And I threw it on the other night. We had the records out at home. It's cool and I'm proud of it, but it's also, we're 19 and it sounds insane. Like all the choices and the tempos and just the sort of the wild youthful attitude to it is so amateurish and so unpolished is the word I'm looking for. And there's this dissonance in my mind where I want to look at the later records where we practiced and we got better and we improved our craft and we were more thoughtful and more mature and maybe even a little wiser. And I want everyone to hear that as being a superior piece of art to this sort of chaotic, youthful vomit blast. But then there's, I guess, some spark that is the one thing you can't learn and the one thing you can kind of only lose. And I don't know what to make of that within the world of music, especially now that I'm still trying to keep going.
Well, don't you think also part of that is the audience? Like you were 19 and making this sporadic, making this like ecstatic and explosive thing. And the people who were discovering it and listening to it were in their 20s and feeling a similar way. And then as you get older, they get older and they have that nostalgia to maybe go back to that first record. That's when the days were good. That just happens so much. Nostalgia is like a real killer for a lot of things.
Yes, I feel that I'm learning that more and more. I had my book club last night and we were talking about everyone's various kids who are sort of, anywhere between 1 and 15. And that sort of like 10, 11-year-old thing where they'll get nostalgic for the first time. They'll sort of realize they're not little kids anymore. And they have that, the first time you have that feeling of having left something behind. And it really brought home to me what a powerful force it is. But as you say, it can also be, especially within art, a pernicious one.
Oh, yeah. It's terrible in art. Like people in my age, I'm in my mid 40s, people just listen to whatever they listened to when they were in their 20s, which is good. That stuff was good. But finding new music and new things, it requires some effort. Now, some of the streaming services have lowered that effort, but that isn't always positive. Sometimes it's extremely positive. But for the most part, like seeking out new music and looking for music, that is not something you have time for when you are 46. With kids or not, like it's just tough to do that. So the nostalgia creeps in.
What is your practice for keeping up with new music?
Well, I subscribe to some playlists that, John Paul Bullock, producer of the show, makes a monthly playlist that I listen to. And that helps a ton because I think we have very similar interests in terms of like our genres and styles and stuff, but not completely aligned. So it's nice to have someone that is making playlists that you're not one-to-one with, because you're going to get exposed to new things. I use services like Bandcamp and use the tags feature. Like, I'm a huge hound of local music, so I just go to the tag of Nashville tag, and see what the most recently uploaded thing is and listen to it. And it does take a conscious effort and time out of your day to make it happen. But that's primarily how it is. The amount of local music I listen to is ridiculous, for good, better or worse.
Well, of all the localities to be based in as a lover of music and new music, Nashville is certainly up there in terms of offerings.
Yeah, it's amazing. To the outside world, Nashville is one thing. And when you live here, it's a very different thing. There's Music Row and commercial country music and downtown and honky tonks. And that is a whole thing that exists to itself. And then if you live here, you don't care about any of that or really experience any of it or see any of it. But there's amazing little indie venues and bars and so many good bands and so many good scenes that really don't leak out. There's a thing called the Nashville curse that bands do not escape Nashville for the most part. It has happened a few times. Be Your Own Pet is credited with breaking the Nashville curse. Paramore, obviously a very good example of a band breaking out of the Nashville curse. But for the longest time, particularly in the 80s and early 90s, it was impossible for bands to get out of Nashville.
And is that related to the fact that Nashville is such a business center for a very specific large corner of the music industry, being commercial country?
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think, there's probably, some replacement style sabotage, a little bit of that, particularly in the 80s. And just, there's mechanisms in place that can help country artists. And if you aren't a country artist, those mechanisms don't necessarily work as well.
I must admit that even I, someone who ostensibly should be paying attention to these things, when I hear Nashville, my brain goes to a very specific place. And if you say, there's a new band in Nashville you got to hear, I maybe am inclined to make assumptions about that band, which you've just kind of embarrassingly perhaps blown my mind open a little bit in terms of, of course, in this big city that's so musically centered, there are people who like other kinds of music and people who make other kinds of music.
Oh, yeah. I could give you a list a mile long of bands, but there's this cool sort of shoegaze collection of bands here that are all doing different things from one another, but they all swap members and they have a cohesion, but different. It's amazing. You would not expect that from Nashville, but they are really remarkable.
So let's go back. Speaking of your autobiography, and speaking of Nashville, you grew up around Nashville, right?
Yes.
Sort of in the environs.
Yes. If I tell people I'm from Nashville, my wife says, you are not from the city proper. You are from the suburbs. So I'm from a suburb called Franklin. She is from the city proper. And I think that's fair. There are a lot of experiences that she had in the city that I did not have. So there's venues and touchstones that I just didn't experience.
Were you close enough to be in touch with the industry of it all? Were you going to school with kids of people who worked at record labels and stuff?
No. And I think that's part of the distinction that's very interesting. She went to school with people whose dads were bass players at RCA Studio A. And that was just very normal. There were all kinds of songwriters. She's Kesha's brother is in her class or whatever, very normal kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas that was all very removed for me. I went to school with a girl named Sunshine Mosier, and her dad's name was Cactus Mosier. I think he was famous.
Sounds like a famous name.
So I was very removed from it, and I yearned for something, a scene of some kind. And there was a venue that opened up in this suburb that was called Rocket Town. And it was actually funded by this Christian artist named Michael W. Smith, who you may have heard of.
Yeah, we got the Wow compilation every year when I was a kid. I've heard some Michael W. Smith tunes.
So he opened this venue called Rocket Town, which still exists. It's in downtown Nashville now, but it was in the suburbs before. And it had local bands and regional bands playing there. And, everything outside of the music was not my scene, but going to see those bands was my scene. And I still listen to and work with some of the bands that I saw at Rocketown.
How far from the city is Franklin?
It's about 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's not so dissimilar to Josh and I grew up in Newmarket, Ontario, which is sort of 45 minutes up from Toronto, which I recognize exactly what you mean, that yearning for the scene where it's right there, but it's not right there because you're 16 years old, so it's not quite so accessible.
Did you have the problem where bands, well, you didn't if you were that close to like a major city. Nashville had this huge problem where bands would not play there, and it was infuriating. Like, I can remember when Granddaddy's Software Slump came out, and I was like, I will drive as far as it takes to go see this. They played Knoxville, which is 3 hours away. They played Memphis, which is 3 hours away. They played Louisville, which is 3 hours away. They played Atlanta, which is 4 hours away. No Nashville. It was crazy. It was awful.
Why is that?
Well, I think at the time there was just not a good booking agent that was catching on to that stuff. There were certainly venues for it, but there just wasn't someone paying attention. And I've learned as I've gotten older that was the issue. It wasn't that the band didn't care about Nashville. It's that Nashville didn't care about those things. And, that's largely been fixed with a lot of new venues and new booking agents now. But at the time, I was mad at the bands.
Yeah. Well, that's how it always works. I mean, whether it's your agent didn't book you in a city or the sound person screwed up the sound or whatever the case is, they just see you up there and you have to wear it.
Yeah, totally.
Heavy lies the crown, Michael. It's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
So you entered the music industry by working at Sponge Bath Records. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. I remember distinctly there was a kid in high school who was wearing a shirt that said Self on it. Shout out to Ian Menard, who was in another band called Detachment Kit. Incredible band. Look them up. Anyway, he was wearing the Self shirt, and then it sort of just dawned on me, like, oh, they're played on the radio. They have a video on MTV, multiple videos on MTV, and they are based 20 minutes from where you live in a town called Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I ended up going to college in Murfreesboro with a lot of people from the suburbs that I lived in. And just as a total Hail Mary, went to the Sponge Bath Records website, which this is 1997. So website's not like novel, but still kind of fresh.
Yep.
And said, your website's not great. Can I help? That's it. And they called me in and they hired me as the web guy for the site. And I'm 18, 19 years old. I had no portfolio, nothing. I just had the gall to email them and ask for it. And yeah, that's where I got my start, was working there. And it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that is no longer relevant at all. Calling radio stations, I guess, is a thing, but most people just email them.
Yeah.
Printing up flyers on a copy machine, still pretty cool, but most people just do it in Photoshop now or Canva.
Yeah, if you do it on the photocopier, it's like a self-conscious aesthetic decision rather than just the easiest and most efficient way to make a flyer for the show.
Yeah, which I do recommend. It is better.
Absolutely. I think, that tactile thing is, to me at least, now more than ever feels like a life raft of a sort.
Yeah, I mean, I think relevant to this show, which is an interesting, I'm glad that you had me on so that I could bring this up, but part of Sponge Bath's thing was it was an indie label. It had these indie bands that were from the Murfreesboro scene that it was looking to promote, but it really was meant to be a conduit to a major label. Its whole business practice was we're an incubator. We're going to find bands that are cool in Murfreesboro, cool in the Southeast, and we're going to shop them to major labels. And that happened a number of times. Self eventually signed to DreamWorks, and the Cadies eventually signed to Elektra, I believe. So they did. I got to witness this process of bands going from being on an indie and graduating into the major label system. And it was often very hard to see. It's a very rough system, the major labels. There's a lot of money there and a lot of potential, but a lot of, listening to people who know better than you. And that might mean editing your favorite song or including a song that you don't think is good to include on the album, but it needs to be on there. That sort of thing.
You are suddenly confronted with the real brutal truth of the commerce part of the art commerce dichotomy. And of course, an indie label needs to sell records too to stay afloat, and they want your records to move. But a major label has no compunctions about saying, we can optimize this for you. This song's too long. This chorus doesn't hit hard enough. There's too many of you in the band. You don't look good in the pictures. Put the attractive one in the front.
Yeah.
And all that stuff hurts your ego and hurts your precious artistic soul. And they don't care at all because they're a major label and you didn't sign to them to have your artistic soul nurtured, although sometimes you kind of think you did.
Yeah, it was hard to see.
I got to ask you something that's a little less relevant to this podcast, but I am so curious, which is your origin story as a web developer and internet user. Because I remember mine so vividly, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but I think we were both dialing up the same kind of modems and looking at the same kind of early primordial World Wide Web.
I mean, the origin is just being a nerd. And
Amen, brother.
We got a home PC when I was a kid in the 80s, and I really loved tinkering around in DOS and figuring out how to call up other bulletin board systems with the modem, the 2400 kbps modem. It didn't even make that long screech. Like everyone associates dialing into AOL with that long screech, but that's a good modem. 2400 is just like, meep, then it's connected.
It's as connected as you're ever going to get.
Yeah. I just enjoyed doing that. And then when people my age had AOL accounts and Prodigy accounts, stuff like that. And they started having web browsers in there. And I thought that was interesting. And I found things. Oh, you can make your own web browser. You can make your own website. That's interesting. So I learned how to write a little bit of HTML. And then when I got to college, I think I bought a book called Learn HTML in 5 minutes. And that was it. And I loved it. And it really set a very solid foundation for writing HTML and a little bit of other bits of code. I was just a nerd. That's it. That's the only way I got into it. There was a love of music and a love of computing. And then I managed to marry the two just out of hobbyist,
And you rode tech into the music industry at a time when that was not a commonly traveled career path. It's amazing that you did that when you did it.
Yeah, well, it was total, that was the time. It wasn't skill necessarily. It was just being in the right place, I suppose. MP3s weren't even a thing when I was working at SpongeBath. Like I mentioned in that YK World episode that I held a meeting with everyone who worked there and was like, I had converted everything we'd released into MP3. I burned them to a data disk and was like, hey, everything we've ever put out is on this one disk. This is coming. We've got to prepare for it. And you should all just be aware of it. And fortunately, they were all really game. They got it. And that band Self had a bunch of B-sides, and we released a B-side album called Feels Like Breaking Shit on the SpongeBath Records website, and people loved it. And it was awesome. I mean, it was legitimately a very new and novel thing that the internet really hadn't seen a ton of at that time.
Do you remember the first MP3 you downloaded?
I sadly do not. It was probably Deftones covering Weezer or something. Sounds like me.
What is your recollection of how technology was looked at by the music industry at large once you started to work your way into it?
It's interesting because I think there was definitely a marketing angle to things that people understood was a great way to reach people. After SpongeBath, I worked for a web design agency, and there were a lot of major labels paying for promotional websites. Like the new Hillary Duff album is coming out. Let's make a player and promote it and collect emails. Like they understood that it was a much more accessible version of walking around with a clipboard at a show and getting people's contact information. You can just do it online. People can just go to this player, listen to 30 seconds of this new record, put their email address in, and now you've got an asset, like a real asset. And that's still like having someone's email is still like an incredible thing to have and very, very powerful. Like all of the algorithms be damned. If you have someone's email, you might actually reach them. The algorithm is going to fail you every time. So I do think that there was, from the majors' point of view, I think they understood it from a marketing perspective. I don't think they really understood what was coming from like the home recording aspect of things. Like, I think it was quite a surprise when it was like, oh, you can make a record at home using Pro Tools that sounds like just as good as if you went to this huge studio. Now, it's a different experience, but sonically, it still sounds very, very good. I don't think they were necessarily as prepared for that. And who knows what they were thinking with the streaming services, but they spent a lot of money. I did the website for Now That's What I Call Music, volume 4 through 24, I think. Like a lot of this.
That is very impressive.
It was
That's
ridiculous.
a feather in your cap.
But around volume like 8, they sent us at the web design agency, and we're like 3 tiers down. Like there's like an ad agency that hired the web design agency. They sent us gold records. So Now That's What I Call Music, volume 8. Here's a gold record with your name etched into it. We each got our own. Those things aren't cheap. Like, why did they spend the money on that to send to us? It's crazy.
What was on the website for Now That's What I Call Music 8?
I mean, it's just a fun animation or for whatever the theme and color scheme was, and then the track listing and an email capture so that you will get maybe a discount code to buy the compilation. Can't hate on compilations though. I will say, do you remember CMJ? Did you ever get that magazine?
I never got the magazine, but they at least used to have a sort of week-long industry festival in New York City that Tokyo Police Club did some sort of memorable, may not be quite the word given the state of us at the time, but important, I was told, gigs at CMJ Festival.
Yes, those gigs were always quite important, even if they were very poorly attended.
Especially somehow.
Yes, but they had the New Music Monthly magazine that came with the sampler CD every month. Yeah. And I discovered so much stuff through that. I later learned that was really just like labels paying for placement on these CDs, not just like CMJ being tastemakers, but it was still a great way to discover new music for sure.
And learning about new music via something that you assume is genuine and only later finding out it was all sort of orchestrated behind the scenes by major labels is as truthful a way to get involved in popular music as any I can think of. That's how it's always worked.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's still happening now. Like, I'm baffled by the number of people that are like trying to get playlist placement on streaming services, and like all of their effort and just strength is focused on getting playlist placement for the exposure that comes with that. And I'm just think there are so many better things to spend your time doing. It is not about getting on the indie radar playlist. It's not a bad thing to get if you could get it, but your efforts are better spent elsewhere.
There's all these sort of traps almost. I remember when we were younger, I had friends in bands who were, from Toronto who would be spending thousands of dollars of their own money to schlep down to Austin in March to play at South by Southwest, thinking, well, this is what you need to do. We're going to go there. We're going to get seen by managers and labels and agents, only to find out that if you're a Canadian band who applied and got in and you don't have any connections, they're putting you on a show at a pizza parlor that's 20 minutes outside of town, and the only people coming to see you are people who already know your band and are chuffed to discover that you're in Austin for some reason, and you've spent all this money and all of your expectations and hopes, and my heart just broke for them every single time, and there's so many versions of that.
Yeah, I wonder if I saw you at South by Southwest at a pizza place outside of town.
We never quite played a pizza place outside of town, but that's the thing. We had a manager and an agent and a label and a lawyer and all these hotshot American team members right from the jump. So our gigs were great. We got parachuted in, and you realize really quickly that that's how they put the good showcases together.
Yeah, I think you also hopefully if you're in that situation and you are playing that gig outside of town, that you just enjoy the experience and that you aren't going in there with the hope that there's going to be a guy that runs up to you afterwards like, I'm going to put your record out. Like, hopefully this is just like, you had a great time driving down there. You were with your buds. You had a blast. Like, you got to play music for 6 people that like you already. Hopefully that's okay.
If this podcast had a, Mr. Monopoly, Uncle Pennybags style mascot, it would be the A&R person you just described, lofting a manila envelope saying, I'm going to sign you. I'm going to be a star.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the main character of all of this.
Yeah. I mean, I think the major label stuff is so fascinating. Getting back to the sponge bath thing, Self really jumped through all the hoops to make a thing that DreamWorks was happy about and could promote and could give them a fighting chance. We can talk about the relationship of art and commerce, but I think there is something under there that's the label is trying to help. They want to make money. That is absolutely their end goal. But they're doing these things to give you the best chance to do that based on their expertise. That's at least the line. But it's also just so much luck and happenstance. I don't know if the band would tell it this way, but to my memory, they jumped through all these hoops. I think there's songs on that record, Breakfast with Girls, that were not intended to be on there, but they were singles. And at the same time, the band Power Man 5000 released their record, at the same time. And Power Man 5000 kind of hit. It kind of picked up a little bit more at radio or MTV or whatever. And so they just shifted all their efforts to focus on Power Man 5000. That's where they were going to have the best return. And Self still got to go on tour and still played a bunch of shows. And, there was some effort there, but it was pretty clear that it was Power Man 5000. That's what we're hitching our wagon to now. And it wasn't until years later that I learned that Power Man 5000 is Rob Zombie's brother. So, of course it picked up. Why wouldn't a radio station play Rob Zombie's brother's band over this very eclectic pop rock, electronic fusion genre band of Self? So, but that's just luck, right? That didn't have anything to do with Self writing bad songs or not playing the game. It was just Rob Zombie's brother put out a record at the same time. Sorry.
Yeah, you can play the game as hard and as skillfully and with as much dedication as you want, but there are always, as in, sport, sometimes there's people that show up touched by the gods of the sport. And in the music industry, sometimes that means they're world-class genius songwriters, and other times it means they're related to famous people who already made money for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's, that it works that way all the way down the pipes, right? People who are just turning on the radio are also maybe more inclined to cock their ear towards something if you can put anything they recognize, any kind of little extra soupçon of familiarity on it for them.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, most of the artists that I work with are we're just trying to build a little fan base locally. And I wish that I had the resources to help people go on tour and stuff. But it's been really interesting to see how those things work on a much more sort of DIY level. And I think back in the day, the Sponge Bath 1990, late 90s era, early 2000s, it was still really hard to book your own tour and get in contact with venues or house shows or know about scenes in other places. There were a lot of zines that helped spread that word, and there were resources for it, but it was very difficult and required a lot of phone calls and really hammering away at it. So I think it's interesting now to see, the internet has its good sides and its bad sides, but one thing that is very cool is that those resources are so much more available. And booking a show from Nashville up to New York and just playing somewhere in North Carolina that has a scene that they love shoegaze, but there's not a lot of shoegaze bands coming through. Like they will have kids show up and it's not playing at a bar, it's playing at someone's house. Those kids are there because they want to see the show. It's awesome to see that. One of the bands that I work with has been going out on little mini tours like that. And it's really cool to see that they're able to succeed like that and not having to call venues and, have people look at their social media and say like, well, you only have 600 followers, so we really can't book you right now. These are places that are like, we listen to your music and we like it, please come.
Yeah, the simple version of it that sometimes it seems like impossibly quaint. Sometimes in my more cynical moments, it seems to me like that kind of thing hasn't existed for 20 years. But of course, it's still just people out there, and there's still people that just like music, and there's people that make music, and you can still bring them together using good old-fashioned human-to-human interaction.
Yeah, I think to be a music fan requires effort now, which sounds funny because there's so many ways to just have music flying at you with no effort.
That's kind of part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. You're not paying attention. Like you're just being fed this stuff. And, I'm not trying to lay like a wide swath with that. Like one of my very good buddies discovers a ton of music through the streaming services recommending music to him. Like they've got him dialed in and they will put stuff on his release radar and he's like, yep, that is me. It is awesome. And he loves it and he goes for it and listens to a lot of the stuff that's being fed to him in a very dedicated way. But I think most people are just putting a playlist on that is being fed to them and it's playing and they probably aren't even thinking much about it anymore. Like to be a music fan now, you have to like pursue further information. And I don't know that people are doing that.
No. Well, there's always been a large proportion of music listeners who their refrain would always be that they listen to what's on the radio.
Yeah.
And, now they listen to what's on their playlist. And there's a lot of people who like to hear music and they like to have music on, but they're not like you and I impassioned or,
right.
They're not like dedicating time and energy to finding more music to love more deeply.
Yeah.
And those people will always exist. And I don't know, sometimes I do find it a little comforting to think of the new paradigm of algorithms and playlists and everything, not as this horrible invention that has corrupted everything, but just the latest manifestation of like, there's a lot of casual listeners who people are going to cash in on. And now it'll be by, getting OpenAI to compose familiar enough sounding music that will sound real enough to sort of keep people happy, which is a depressing change to my ears, but doesn't mean the same thing for the people who love music and for the fans of music.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, most conversations we have these days are painted with a very black and white kind of context. And there's just a lot of gray in everything, like we could talk for a long time about how bad AI is, but also maybe how there's some benefits to AI and like there's some cool parts to it that you just can't deny, but also they ripped everybody off without permission and that stinks. And like, it's a conversation that requires nuance and the internet really doesn't like nuance. But I agree with you about the listenership and the fandom for sure.
I'm glad to hear you say that. It's something I tell myself frequently, but sometimes I wonder if it's only something I tell myself, a nice story to calm my jangled nerves.
Yeah, I think, I think about the internet and how powerful and positive it is a lot. And then I look at social media and I'm like, oh yeah, it also has like a whole lot of bad sides to it as well. Like Threads, I think, is a very good example of like a platform that could easily be agnostic and just be a place to be a Twitter alternative. Like X obviously sucks. Don't go on X. Cancel your X account. Like it's a cesspool. Come over to Threads. We're neutral. We're whatever. Come talk on here. But it's clearly not that. Like if you are looking at Threads, it is obviously there to incite ire and to rile you up, because if you are riled up, you will engage with it more.
Yeah, even Reddit, which is, for a long time sort of became my go-to internet aggregation thing. And, everyone talks about how if you want to get any useful information out of a Google search, you have to append Reddit to the end of it.
That's right.
But even that recently, I knew someone who had like just a minor routine medical procedure recently, but it was new to me. So I looked up about it so that I would know what to expect in the aftermath. I was reading the Reddit threads, and at first I was getting really worried, like, oh, geez, this actually sounds quite a lot more severe and serious, and there's all these kind of things. And then I slowly started to dawn on me that, well, am I just getting all of the scary, keep looking, keep reading, don't navigate away from this website, whatever you do, content blasted into my eyeballs in a way that's totally distorting? And sure enough, the thing went down, and it could not have been more of a chill routine experience. And I'm glad I didn't let the Reddit thing drive me, up the wall for once.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big main concern there is like, how do we find the real information, in 8 months, in 12 months or whatever, when these things have become more and more powerful and the algorithms are even more gripping, like, how do we find out what is that operation like?
Yeah.
Is Wikipedia trustworthy? Can we just use that?
Yeah, I guess I'll go to the medical library and learn Latin.
Yeah, we're all going to go back to the library for sure. Just check out a book.
Maybe that's for the best.
Yeah, it probably is.
I do kind of feel like a bit of a tech accelerationist sometimes, where I think, okay, let's just let's finish ruining the internet. I'm going to miss it. I don't know if you feel this or if you found corners of the internet that give you the old feeling, but I also am a nerd, and I spent a lot of time in high school and adulthood reading the internet, looking at websites, looking at forums. I lurked more than posted, but I like to know what was going on out there. The same way that, going to parts of Toronto I used to live in that have been changed beyond all recognition gives me a sadness. Now going on most of the internet gives me a sadness. Is that your experience?
It is not, because I really try to keep that practice of just looking at the internet. And I think the lexicon of the world has changed, where when we say the internet now, we almost immediately mean Facebook and Threads and Instagram and social media sites, because that's where all the people are.
Yeah.
Like everyone's in there and it's very lively, and that's the internet. That's the beating heart of the internet. But to me, the internet really is what you're talking about, which is just like weird websites and just stuff that people are still taking the time to be like, they're learning code and trying something out. They built a portfolio of their works offline. That stuff still exists. Maybe it's not as like easy to find anymore, because like Threads, if you post a link in your thread, they will suppress your post. They don't want you to show a link, because then you'll leave the site. So it is harder to find those things, and you have to make a conscious effort. It's very similar to being a music fan. Like, you have to make this effort. And I really believe that social media, if you just let yourself tune out, like try and go online and be like, I will not look at any social media, no browser tabs for social media, but I'm just going to like look at the internet and see where it leads me. I'm not allowed to look at Reddit. I'm not allowed to look at any of these other places, and just try and find something weird. You'll find it. It's there, and it will be a treat.
I resolved to do just that.
But I say that also with your analogy about like your town and seeing it change. And that happens in Nashville so much. This neighborhood that I'm in my studio is undergoing unbelievable change. Like literally 360 degrees around my office is construction. There is a new giant building going up all around me. And people talk about how Nashville's done and it's over and it sucks now. And it's like, I don't know, man. I grew up 30 minutes outside of it, and you couldn't get Granddaddy to play here for the life of you. And now maybe there's too many venues now. And there is tons of stuff happening. And yeah, downtown sucks, but don't go down there. It's like social media. Just don't go down there. Just stay on the outskirts and go to Dark Matter or something, like a little DIY venue,
And that's nostalgia. I mean, that's, in Toronto, we have lots of venues. We've always had lots of venues, and consequently, venues are closing all the time. And in the last, with COVID and everything, obviously, it's been supercharged a bit. And for a while, I would really mourn these various venues and then take that as yet another horseman of our sort of ongoing civic apocalypse. And then I sort of realized that, well, gee, I keep hearing about new venues too. And it's like every time one venue closes, there's actually 3 already going that replace it. And this isn't quite the same as the novelty we were talking about earlier, but it does seem like in a healthy ecosystem, there is death and renewal, and a healthy music scene probably needs not like only venues that can be called the legendary blank. It also needs venues that are like, I'm too old to go to, because that needs to be a home for a different kind of music. And that nostalgia for the city that you were young in is a understandably powerful force, but it can also be as much of an enemy of progress as building condos and Starbucks.
Totally. Yeah. It's again, it's a nuanced conversation. Like, I'm not trying to say I'm a proponent of all new construction and the new version of Nashville is like the only way to go. And when something closes or is torn down, I'm not upset about it. Like, yeah, I understand our history and I am beholden to like respecting it. I do respect it, but new stuff's cool too. Like, you got to like them both. It's okay.
And if ever a city didn't need to worry too much about like not respecting its history enough, I feel like Nashville is going to be okay in terms of having Grand Ole's Opry and Music's Row.
It's true. There's a lot of putting on airs in that world that's so gross. Like, they're actually building a venue 2 blocks from my office and they are calling it The Truth. The name of the venue is The Truth. That is awful. That is so up your own ass about like how good your music venue is going to be.
That's from like a Don DeLillo novel.
2 chords and the truth. Yes. That's the old quote. And we're the truth, the venue. It's like, man, I'm sure the people running this are nice people and their hearts are in the right place, just like a major label. But man, don't call it that. Don't do it.
So it's really interesting, sort of, we're on these parallel tracks of technology and music, and I think that that's really appropriate for this podcast because, the manifestation of commerce in the art commerce mix right now is very technologically focused. I'm really curious how you started at Sponge Bath Records as a web developer, as a tech guy. You obviously made your way to becoming, you now have your own record label, YK Records. How quickly at Sponge Bath did you start to branch out into, other label operations, calling radio stations or whatnot?
I definitely, when I worked there, I, like everybody there, wore whatever hat was needed at the time. So like, I did the website. There wasn't a term for it at the time, but I like interacted with the message board. So I was like the community manager in that way. I would definitely pack envelopes as much as needed. I ran merch tables when needed. I went to South by Southwest when I was 19. And let me tell you, if you go down there and you can't drink, not great.
I've done it.
Fun, but it's not really an event that's designed for that.
Yeah, as the band, you can usually find some cold Lone Stars somewhere that no one's paying attention to, but it's a little trickier when you have the giant X's on your hands.
For sure. I've lived it as well. So yeah, I did as much as I could in that regard and really just tried to pay attention to everything, like how did we get press? And it was a lot of like, you kind of schmoozed this guy from Spin. Like they would invite this dude from Spin to come and hang out and like, be a part of this recording session or this other thing because he was going to write a big feature about the band. Or like you would really build a relationship with a radio station in Louisville just because you connected about some one weird thing and be like, oh yeah, I like that flavor of gum too. And that bonded you, and then they would play your stuff. So it was really about these personal connections and like continuing to sort of nurture them. And I'm sure I was not conscious of those lessons being taught to me at the time, but that's absolutely what was happening, was just seeing that like anything that was successful was because of a personal connection and doing the work to build those connections. And once you had them once, they could be repeated over time. So, if a radio station played Self, then when your Call Florence Powell record was ready to go, another artist on Sponge Bath, they would play that. So it was really about that. And I have taken that lesson with me. And, there are certain people that I go to right away when I have something because I think they are champions and fans of what I'm putting out. And I try and support them. And I think they benefit from it by having something interesting to talk about or play as well. So your question was like about what hats did I learn there and how quickly did I like move away from being web guy? I think from the beginning, like the very beginning, there was only like 8 people that worked there. So you kind of had to do whatever was asked of you.
Did you start blogging at uni, which became the YK of YK Records, while you were still at Sponge Bath? I got to keep all of these ventures straight. And we'll get to the podcast and the beard growing competition.
Yeah. Yeah, so I started blogging. My college, MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, they gave you server space. So you could like log into your server. That's how you got your email, but you could also upload stuff. So I started doing like little website experimentations there. And then I don't know why I thought this, but I was like, I got to buy a domain. And so I bought uni.com and started doing those little art experiments there. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, it really wasn't even a blog. It was just like some cool art that I made for the internet. And then eventually I started adding like blog stuff to it. And then it kind of evolved or transformed, whichever, into a full-on blog. And I still post to it semi-regularly now, which is like very crazy that I'm still doing it, but it's fun to like find a weird thing on the internet and then post it somewhere else for someone else to potentially enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm going to be following it. I have a neighbor in my studio building here who was running a blog like that for a while, and I was so delighted that it existed. And then one day I went to it and it was gone, and I texted him. He said, "Oh yeah, I like to just do things for a year or so." And then speaking of novelty, so now he has a different blog that's just voice recordings of him reading his poetry.
That's awesome. I love that.
It's incredible. Yeah. And again, it's something you find on the internet that's this little nugget of just, well, truth.
You got to play at this new venue. Yes, for sure. I was blogging back then. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of like how all of these weird little internet experiences kind of came to be, was that it was novel then and you could do a lot on your own. Like making a website now has become so convoluted for people. Like I still keep up with like actual tech changes and like what's the new version of React and what's Next.js up to and what's the new Cloudflare serverless, whatever, like all that stuff. It's so convoluted. And I'm sure someone listening to this will comment and say, actually, if you just get Docker, you can launch your own container to make it. Yes. There are easy ways to do it, but really you just need an HTML text file and that's your website. That's all you need. So I was interested in learning about all of those things and how all those things work. And little art ideas came to mind that a, 20-something kid would come up with, such as, what's it like to grow a beard? What if I took a picture of myself growing a beard every day? What if I put that picture on the internet, invited other people to do the same and put a picture of themselves online? So in like 2003, I did that and like had a website that was just beard contest, not an interesting name. And people uploaded pictures of themselves every day growing a beard. And I built a little chat thing and we had like a forum. And then we did it again and I renamed it Whiskerino and 2 of my buddies helped me out to like make it better. And then we did it again and again a couple times. The internet, you could just do weird stuff like that.
I got sucked into the Squarespace world when I was making my website and stuff. And it seems so much easier because it's just put a word here, put a picture here, click, clack, done. It does it all for you. And then recently I realized that now I can't do anything about my website that I want. And I miss using like Netscape Communicator to design it. And similarly, I feel, because it's like flattening, it's like sucking all the ideas into these. It goes on Instagram, it goes on Squarespace. But there was a time when you could just make beard contest and it would be its own thing. People would go to beard contest to participate in the beard contest rather than doing it via TikTok, even if that would be like easier. And I miss that version of the internet where any sort of odd website could take on an entire life of its own.
Yeah. And, I've thought about bringing it back. There's definitely been like people that have nudged me to like do it again. Nostalgia again, kind of coming back a little bit. But we had a blast. Like we had such a fun time, like just communicating and having a blast on the internet with one another. But I couldn't bring it back now because of exactly that. Like, oh, how do I post this to my Instagram stories and cross post it with my TikTok and my whatever? And I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to figure out how to do any of that. I want it's encapsulated private community that's just doing something stupid on the internet, you know?
We were just talking before we started the interview, John Paul and Josh and I, about, as we often are, about getting the podcast to more and more listeners and continuing to grow this beautiful seed we've been watering. And I've been realizing, I keep hammering the Instagram button over and over again because it's sort of the last social media that I have and understand how to use. And I realize more and more, Instagram, not only is it not designed to send people to my long form podcast interviews, it's designed to stop me from sending people to it.
Yes.
And instead just create content for Instagram. And then you turn around and your beautiful idea to have a long form interview podcast or a beard growing contest or whatever, you've now accidentally taken a full-time job as a content creator for someone else's profit.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's true if you're a musician as well, sadly, more and more.
Absolutely. It's so hard. Like, I totally feel you on all of that. I have been doing the same with my own podcast and the record label, like posting these 30, 40-second little reels to like tell people about a new release. And I am realizing, no one's going to link out. I'm just like in their feed. I'm like the next thing that they look at.
Yeah.
But there is some awareness there. So maybe just do a half-assed job at what you're doing, like less effort into it.
No problem. That's the amount of ass I was born to put into my work. You were a podcast early adopter, truly. You were podcasting basically as soon as that word was coined by old Stevie Jobs, right?
Yeah, as soon as Steve Jobs uttered it. So in like, God, 05? Is that how long ago it was? I don't remember the exact year.
Yeah, it was early iPod days, and that's right around then.
Yes. So like the idea of an RSS feed with an enclosure, I'll push my glasses up, with a file enclosure on it, predates Steve Jobs kind of getting involved with it. So there is podcasts as a technical entity prior to iTunes getting its fingers into it. But to their credit, Apple was pretty on it. Like, it became a thing, and then relatively soon thereafter, they adopted it into iTunes. And there was a thing in town called a website in town called We Own This Town that this guy Doug Lehman started, and he was like on it. Like, I got to give credit to Doug. He was on it and started a podcast, and I loved what he was doing. It was radio on demand that was showcasing artists that would not have had that opportunity otherwise. And it could be any form, and it didn't have to conform to FCC anything. And so I got involved with him like as quickly as I could and sort of took over the thing, I guess. Or maybe he stepped away, or maybe a little bit of both, and have been running that podcast for a long time, like 19 years. And recently have decided to like rework things, because like your friend, like sometimes it's good to like stop doing a thing, and started YK World, which is essentially the same kind of idea as like just me having a podcast talking about music and technology and local artists and YK Records and stuff. But now I can do it and talk about YK Records openly and promote things that I feel comfortable about. Whereas with We Own This Town, which was supposed to be like a Nashville podcast, it felt weird to be hosting a show and be like, oh, also check out the new record from Zook. I put it out. It's really good, but I would have played it anyway. Like, I don't have to caveat like that anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was early to the podcast thing and still think it's super powerful. And I wish there was a better way to have music on a podcast without getting like Spotify will like shut you out if you play more than 30 seconds. But I'm just sort of like, screw it. Don't listen to it then. Like, they're already paying the PROs for music placement. Like, why is this an area? I weigh in the comments about why I'm wrong on this, but there's got to be a better way to have a music podcast.
Yeah, well, I wonder if it's another situation where their interests are at odds with the interests of, the would-be curator, where you might want to say, and I might want to listen to, here's my show, and I'm going to choose these songs for you. And not only that, I'm going to explain a little bit about them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the music and contextualize it, that kind of radio show that we both probably grew up loving. And maybe Spotify doesn't want your curatorial voice in the mix. They have their own robotic curatorial voice that they want people to sort of be in that infinite stream that just keeps on going.
Yeah. At first I thought it was like, you're playing music you don't have permission to play, and those artists aren't getting paid. So you can't play that. And that feels legit. Fine. You shouldn't do that.
We know Spotify cares a lot about getting artists paid.
Yeah, but they have content ID, because I get emails that are like, hey, we recognize this song in your podcast. Do you have permission to play it? Yes or no? So if they know what the song is, they can pay the PRO. Like, they're already paying a blanket fee for that stuff. Like,
yep.
I don't know. I'm sure there's nuance to my argument, but I just want a radio show where I can play stuff.
Hell yes. Me too. Truly. Okay, we're going to figure this out. Sound off in the comments about how we can do this. Yeah. What's a pirate radio station on the internet in 2026?
I've actually thought about buying a radio broadcaster, because you know, like churches will do like a little broadcast or whatever, or like a drive-in movie theater will do like a low signal.
Right, of course. Broadcast. Like you used to have for your iPod. You'd have a little FM transmitter and you'd have to turn to the lowest frequency and listen to your music.
So I want to get a Raspberry Pi and one of those and just broadcast within 100 yards of my office. And if you happen to be driving by and you happen to be tuned in to this Wright signal, you can hear some cool new local music.
Well, next time I'm in the neighborhood, I will be sure to park outside your office. And
especially with the truth going up, I could get some real listeners.
You got to leave your Wi-Fi open so that people stop to use like we used to have to do on tour, like drive around looking for open networks and log on. And then you say, hey, well, you're on, you can make the name of the network, the frequency, you tune in, off you go.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Synergy.
That is brilliant. Yes. Thank you for that.
So amidst the blogging, the podcasting, you sort of went and worked more directly in tech post Sponge Bath. And then is it too simple to say you sort of worked at Sponge Bath, then worked in doing tech stuff, then started YK Records? I'm sure there was a little more overlap than that, but can you give me the story in your own words is what I'm really trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at Sponge Bath and then eventually started a web design agency with a buddy of mine. And so we were making websites for Hilary Duff and Lenny Kravitz, and now that's what I call music. And that was my job for a very long time. And while I was doing that job, simultaneously, we had an office across the street from a coffee shop. And there was a guy that worked at the coffee shop who was in a band called Kindercastle. And I loved Kindercastle. They were like a local ELO. Like they had a string quartet that played with them. Cool. They like wrote all these incredible pop songs. Amazing band. And so I was just like laying it on thick with this, guy at the coffee shop. I'm like, I love your band. It's so good. You guys are so great. And I would see him 3 times a day because I'm a coffee fiend. And I go in the morning and I go in for lunch and I go maybe in the late afternoon. And eventually, after that friendship sort of struck up, he was like, I have this other music that I don't know what to do with it. Like, it's not Kindercastle songs, but I don't know. I just have this other music. Do you want to hear it? And I was like, yeah, I would love to hear it. And it just sort of struck me like, oh, I want to put music out into the world. I'm not a musician. I have no clue how to write or perform a song, but I do love helping people get their music out there. Like, that's just a thing I enjoy. And the part of that's from helping Hilary Duff and helping Now That's What I Call Music and having that experience of getting that word out. You could take those exact same ideas and apply them to Kindercastle or a small local band because it's the internet and like the tools are exactly the same. The website for Lenny Kravitz and the website for Kindercastle are no different. And I think that that's beautiful and amazing. So I worked with this guy. His name is Ross Warner. His pseudonym for his solo work was called Uncle Skeleton. And he had a batch of 14 songs or so. And it's called Poncho Chumley. It's YK001. But yeah, it was just like, okay, we're going to put out this Uncle Skeleton record and we're going to do a really small run of CDs and I'll put up a website for you and that'll kind of be it. Like, there's no pressure. Like, we're not trying to make it big. We're not trying to like do anything crazy. This is just like small time. Let's have fun and just rinse and repeat, doing that with like many artists over time. And it grew into more than that. But I think like that's still the general idea is like, I want bands to be successful. Everyone I work with, I want to have like the best opportunity they can have to be successful. And we work together to figure out how to do that. But we're also just trying to have fun and like, you know, I don't want anybody to be like disappointed that they're not getting Mr. Monopoly to come and like sign them to a major label. Though if that happens, it has happened, I think once, not a major, but a bigger indie. Yeah, we're just putting out records and like using the internet to spread the word and trying to answer the question of what good is a record label in 2025 or 2026, you know? And I think the short answer to it is community and just like working together and like building it that way. It's really fascinating. So YK was just born out of like, this guy's got music I like. I want to be involved with music in some way, but I'm not a musician. So I'm going to use my nerdy skills for good and put music out into the world. And it just naturally evolved from that.
You said something in your YK World podcast pilot, shall we say, that just sent envy and jealousy coursing through my body, which was that you decided from the jump that you were going to just not look at numbers and metrics and not worry about those things. And that sounds great. And I'm curious if you run the label. I know you can't literally never look at numbers when you're running a business and remitting money to bands, but are you sort of consciously trying to steer clear of some of the more, you know, quantification elements of running the record label in 2025, 6?
Yeah, I mean, I do now for sure. Like, obviously there are financial aspects to it that I have to pay attention to, and I do pay out bands, and I do have to be mindful of what I'm putting on my credit card to make the new run of vinyl happen. So there are some numbers that I pay attention to, but I don't think that there's anything healthy about seeing how many followers you have or seeing how many listens a song has, that sort of thing. I want artists to be successful, but there's only like disappointment and heartbreak in that. Both Spotify and Apple Music have a feature that like will email you every week a little summary of how your song did. And I was getting that for a number of the artists that I work with, and it would be like, number of plays this week, 0. Number of listens from, you know, Shazam, 0. Number of playlist additions, 0. And I was like, why are you sending the email? If the number is 0, don't send the email. Like, that's so disheartening. And it made me think like, man, that record's not doing great. And I went and looked and listened to the record again. And I was like, this record is awesome. This record rules. Like, I don't care that no one at Apple Music picked up on the Prudish Fuse LP. It's very good.
The list is long, viewed with perspective, it veers. Arcing over time, the meanings of things changing. Practically with your seasons, with rhyme and for reasons.
And I'm not going to let a metric tell me otherwise. And I think the internet that is one of its like horrible like things that it's done to not just the music industry, but just like everybody. It's like applied a number to artistic success that is completely meaningless.
Yeah.
Like the number of followers you have doesn't mean anything to the goodness of a creation.
Or even just how funny your joke is, you know, something that you'd say
Right.
in a group of friends at the bar and everyone would laugh and you'd feel great. You'd get that little charge that you get from being funny. And now you can post it on Twitter or Threads or Instagram and you can see exactly how many people thought it was funny enough to press heart on it. And inevitably that's going to make you feel bad. So why go there?
Yeah, it's been like really mostly freeing with YK World to not look. And, if you upload the episode to YouTube, the views are there. So like there's some of it that you can't really avoid, but I do make a conscious effort not to look at those particular numbers. And then elsewhere, I just didn't hook anything up. So there aren't numbers to see. So even if I was tempted, I can't even be tempted because they just don't, those metrics are not being collected. And it feels good.
I am so glad. That's like a goal for me. I'd love to get, we always say, okay, what's the goal for the podcast in 2026? Hopefully we can get to such and such a benchmark. But I think my true spiritual goal is to just not have to ever look at numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is something I talk about with bands too, is like, what's your goal for this release? And I think a lot of bands don't think about that and don't have that idea in mind, because I think often the goal is just like, I want to release the music. I want to get the music out there. But, maybe it's good to be like, I want to play 5 shows. I want to, have an opportunity to open for a band at Jack White's venue, like something like that. Like, set some goals for yourself, but don't make it be, I want 100 new followers. Like this podcast is getting phenomenal guests though. So you're clearly doing the right things. Don't pay attention to the metrics. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Amen. The producer's like, great. We almost had Graham caring about the numbers. And now he's back in hippie world. What excites you about the future of the music business or the music world, either as it relates to tech or perhaps as it deviates from tech?
I think the thing that's exciting me the most recently is, and maybe this is naive, but the thing that's exciting me the most recently is these sort of alternative distribution platforms outside of streaming. And this gets into a lot of being a conscious music fan and maybe being a part of a group of people that isn't just having music come at you like without any effort. But there are a lot of new platforms that are coming up to find and support music that really excite me. Bandcamp is the most obvious, and they're not really new, but they have been a staple for a long time. Them being sold twice and firing a bunch of people, not a great look, not cool, but they have done Bandcamp Friday pretty frequently in 2025, not as much as they did previously, but they've still been doing it. They've been introducing slowly but surely some new features like playlisting and curation and stuff like that. They're still doing it, but there's a bunch of Bandcamp alternatives now that are all like smaller niche communities that are really rad, like Ampwall, Subvert, Nina, Jam.coop, like Artcore. Like there's like so many platforms where you can put your music up now and interact with the people building it and interact with the other musicians that are putting their music up there and connect with them and like find out tips and tricks or things to try that you'd never considered before. And that is exciting to me, is to like have community that is like driven by the idea of supporting one another and like really the idea, what you would hope the internet would be, that sort of thing. Not just about sales, but just about like, hey, we're in this together. Nobody knows what they're doing for real. So like, have you tried Pandora's AMP program? Ever heard of that? No, never heard of it. Turns out it's a thing. But there's these awesome platforms where you can get plugged into these communities and have a voice in what they're doing. And it's awesome. It's like really satisfying.
That is great news. I'm going to clip the audio of you saying all those names and investigate. Because I've loved Bandcamp since, it was pretty new and I found it and I thought it was really felt revolutionary at the time. And it still does. It's kind of the only thing that I've become aware of. And it works really elegantly. It's easy to use for the average musician. It's intuitive and it moves in a way that's expected. And it's good to know there's other places like that, because it does seem like nothing gold can stay for too long, and the sales and the firings, as you mentioned, do augur poorly, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Like with venues, one establishment closes and more open their doors.
Absolutely. check them out. I highly recommend them.
Okay.
Amp wall is a great place to start.
Amp wall. We love an amp wall. Tell me about Good Signal, your newest venture, I believe.
Yeah, my newest venture. So I work with an artist named Matt Pelham. His pseudonym is Matt and the Watt Gives. He used to be in a band called The Features, and The Features were a band that was on Sponge Bath that eventually got signed to a major label, Universal Records, with their album Exhibit A. That's just a little preamble to tell you who we're dealing with here. A musician that has been through the ringer. He saw what was happening with public radio's funding here in the United States being stripped away. And he called me and he said, what can we do to help here? Like, I will get The Features back together. Like, we haven't played since 2017, but I'm pretty sure I can get the guys on board. Let's do a benefit show and like raise some money for public radio. These stations are very important to me. I get all my news from our local public radio station. I get exposed to so much music from this other radio station. Let's do this. And so I said, I'm on board. Let me make some phone calls and see what I could do to like put together this benefit show. And I started like making phone calls and trying things out. And it just like by perfect happenstance, my friend Carolyn Bowman Schneider was like posting on her Instagram, if anybody needs any help with graphic design or any other projects, I'm poking around. And I was like, hey, do you want to help me with this fundraiser thing that I'm starting on? And she's like, yeah, of course. That'd be amazing. Caroline's history with Nashville is like incredible. She used to work for this record label called Cold Lunch Recording. She put on this festival called Spew Fest. She books at this like local beloved bar venue place. Like she does stuff for Record Store Day. She's like incredible. So for her to want to like collaborate on something was very exciting. But because she has all those experiences, she didn't want to just do like a show. Let's do a thing. If we're going to like fundraise, let's do a thing. So we came up with a name. We called it Good Signal. And we are putting on 2 nights of shows to raise money for public and community radio. Here in Nashville, we have 2 public radio stations and 1 community radio station. So they both need a lot of money to continue operating, and they both do a lot of good for the Nashville music scene. So that's how it came to be. We have a thing called Good Signal. We're basically like a concert promoter. It went from being 1 band being booked to raise money to being 2 bands to being 2 bands over 2 nights. And now I think we're at 2 bands over 2 nights with 12 bands playing in another room across the way with 6 DJs playing in a different room across the way from that. All as a means of bringing the community into one place to raise money for these radio stations that need it. And it feels super good. It's a lot of work, but it feels awesome to like book these bands that want to help out and see the community like buy tickets and get stoked on this event. I do not know where this project will go. We have two nights booked. We have great intentions and many ideas, but there's literally nothing planned beyond these 2 shows. But because we gave it a name, there can be and hopefully should be.
I think there should be, and sadly, I think there will continue to be a need for it for the foreseeable. And I love public radio so much. You know, it's structured differently in Canada. We have the CBC, which is sort of state funded. They don't have to do fundraising. It rules. It's a little, well, it's, you know, it's also subject to the tides of politics. And I worked at the CBC for a long time, and internally you could really feel the push and the pull of who was in power or who was threatening to come to power in terms of how adventurous people felt. But in the meantime, it stitches communities together. I mean, you were talking earlier about how a church will broadcast a very small little radio, and that's kind of cute and quaint and funny sounding, but also when you really think about it, that is so powerful, the ability to do that. And it's kind of the earliest form of mass media, even if the mass is only another 20 people.
Yeah, still count.
I think that's about the right number of people for a community in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Agreed. It is exciting. Like, I wish that there was a lot of different behaviors in the United States with arts funding. Obviously, there's so many examples in Canada of where arts funding is just like works incredibly well and produces some fantastic outcomes.
Yes.
You know, I'm looking at you, broken social scene.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I wouldn't have had a career without arts funding and Canadian content regulations where, you know, I don't know how much Americans know this, but in Canada, the radio and television and everything has to play a defined certain percent of Canadian content. And so if you're a Canadian rock band that's any good, the Canadian radio station is going to take a flyer on you, where American radio stations will just like put another Offspring song in the playlist because they know people like that and they know that it will keep people from turning the dial. But when you're forced to have a Canadian act on there, then you might put a Tokyo Police Club song on. Lo and behold, Tokyo Police Club, okay band.
Yeah, and what a low bar to put into place. You know what I mean? Like, hey, radio, you got to play 10% of bands from our country or whatever the number is. Like, it's not hard, guys. Come on, United States. Let's get it together.
Come on, United States, let's get it together. Yes, as true today as it was when it was written. Well, we are arriving at the thrilling conclusion. I'm going to ask you our ceremonial last question, and then I'm going to bring John Paul on for a quick Whiskerino check.
Okay.
But first, the question that we always wrap up with, as a listener, you must already know this.
I've been preparing.
When you were working at Sponge Bath Records, or perhaps when you were making the Now That's What They Call Music website, or when you were starting YK Records or the podcast or any of your other endeavors, how are you fueling it food-wise?
Yeah. So when I was working at Sponge Bath, I was fueling it with packs of Lucky Strike cigarettes that were 2 for $1, which tells you the quality of those cigarettes back in 1997. But more recently, I will say that there was a Fido coffee shop was where I met Ross Warner, Uncle Skeleton, which kicked off YK Records. I went there 3 times a day. It would be unfair not to shout them out. John Stevenson was the chef there at the time. I know that because he made the absolute best burger I've ever eaten in my life. And I don't eat meat anymore, but I miss that burger because it was incredibly good. I will also then shout out Sassafras Market here in Wedgwood, Houston, where I now work. No longer exists. Sadly, it has moved on, but it had the best tofu banh mi I think the Southeast has ever experienced, and I miss it greatly. So those are my fuel: cheap cigarettes, hamburgers, and tofu banh mi.
That is sort of 2 very American answers and then a very music industry answer. I had like a tofu banh mi. I don't eat meat anymore either, and I'm constantly looking for, you know, new ways to scratch that mouth-watering itch, and a tofu banh mi might just do the trick. John Paul Bullock, producer of Major Label Debut and many times possessor of one of the finest beards I've ever laid eyes upon. Gentlemen, would you tell me, as quickly or slowly as you like, about how you two met and the experience of Whiskerino?
When you were talking about Whiskerino, it made me think about, it was like an early social media site.
I think I would have agreed with that like maybe 6 months ago, but now I think social media is defined by algorithm and like having some way of surfacing content to you. Whereas Whiskerino was just like, it was basically like a fancy forum. It was like, here's all the new stuff. It is in a linear like line, like most recent posted first, work your way backwards. So I guess it was social media in that it was a social environment, but there was no algorithm whatsoever.
Well, shout out to Chad Pugh and Casey Pugh for hipping me to Whiskerino, because I'm so glad that we became friends all those years ago through the magic of your website.
Shout out to them for sure. Not only did I meet some quality weirdos on the internet through that, but then Casey Pugh started a startup called VHX that was like where I worked. I got a job there, and then that got bought by Vimeo, and I worked at Vimeo. Like, it was my career for over a decade. So yeah, Whiskerino was pretty sweet.
And Casey's got a bunch of new stuff. I heard he has a new video game coming out. He was, during COVID, created the app version of a very popular card game, right? What's it called? Wavelength. It's called Wavelength. Casey, you're great if you're listening to this.
I have a question. John Paul,
Yes.
I apologize if this is personal, but do you ever think about whiskerining again?
the problem as a bald man with a beard is, where does it end? Where does it begin? And the glasses provide a natural framework for the beard to hang on, If not, it's just sort of hair that has migrated from sort of the back of your head around to the front of your face. And it's like an aesthetic problem. I don't know exactly how. I don't find it visually appealing, and I need to it's having a beautiful, luxurious head of hair like you both do. You can rock your beard all day long, but as in my Yul Brynner stage, I do think that I'm gonna have to do some experimentation. Maybe I'll go very thick mustache like you.
What if you do like the Civil War, like no chin beard, like the mutton chops into the mustache, but bald chin, bald head?
As a Southerner, I want to avoid as much Civil War anything as possible, just in general terms. But yeah, maybe I'll try it. I'm up for yes. So Graham, the answer is yes. There will be beards. Beards come and go. Right now, my beard is on vacation.
I don't think I will have a Whiskerino style beard again, because it was literally 4 months of don't touch your face, no trimming, like nothing.
Yeah.
Some people did, but the intent was just let it go for 4 months. And I like to eat soup, and you just can't do that at that point. So I don't think it'll happen again, but it was a real blast. And I highly recommend joining a community, maybe a small Discord, or maybe like a random forum online. Like, they still make message boards, and just interacting with people in that way. Like, we've really lost that with social media, but there's
For
still...
sure.
I'll shout out Ampwall again. They have a Discord. I'm on Ampwall. They have a Discord. And there's probably like a couple hundred people in the Discord, but only like 25 of them are really active. So you get to know everybody, and it's a blast. It's really a blast. And I think, the internet just isn't wired that way anymore. Like, they really want you to be like with the masses. And I don't like that. Just as much as I don't like going to a festival, I'm not a festival person. I don't want to go to a festival. I don't want to be around 10,000 people. I don't want to see a band with 10,000 other people. No, thank you. But you send me to a bar where there's 15 other people, I'm sold. I love it. So that still exists on the internet. Just got to find your 15-person bar.
Find your 15-person bar. Words of wisdom.
I mean, yeah, incredible. And thank you for making a 15-person bar in Whiskerino, and for making so much good internet that's allowed me to continue to enjoy the internet, and not, although I do still want to throw my phone into the ocean.
Well, I've been soft launching my initiative based on two things we were talking about. Throw your phone out, take up smoking. We will be healthier as a society if we put phones away and get cigarettes back out. It would be better for everyone individually and collectively. I genuinely believe that. We can fix the lungs. We'll get ChatGPT, sole purpose ChatGPT, curing lung cancer. Then we can all smoke beautiful cigarettes and never look at Instagram ever again. Problem solved. You're welcome.
I will say, I have quit smoking, and now think of it as a disgusting thing, and it feels good to have quit smoking, but I've never quit my phone. And I bet it would feel even better to quit my phone.
Because smoking only fucks up your body, Your phone fucks up like your brain and your soul. Your immortal human essence is just like riddled with Swiss cheese holes from rays of algorithmic delight. Anyway, this has been Major Label Debut. Michael, thank you so much.
Brought to you by Skull Bandits.
Thank you so
Thank you all
much.
so
Thank you very much.
That's Michael Eades of YK Records and YK World, the podcast, and Music City, USA, and being a great hang and a real, as I said at the beginning, a true blue friend of this podcast. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Michael, not just for the great conversation, not just for everything he's done for music and for art in Nashville and beyond, not only for what he's done for Major Label Debut producer John Paul Bullock with his wonderful Whiskerino enterprise, but for carrying the torch for a version of the music business and a version of the internet-connected music business that doesn't look so dystopian, and that actually seems like maybe somewhere the internet is in some small way fulfilling the utopian promises that came with its early adoption. If you were alive in the 90s when the internet went wide, there was a lot of hope around what it was going to do for humanity in general. And obviously things have shaken out a little differently than we all expected, but at least where Michael Eades is concerned, there's still a bit of that original shining beautiful promise in there. And I'm just, part of this show, as I'm always saying, is I'm identifying these people out there, scattered across America and across the world who are fighting the good fight. And the more of them that I talk to and prove to myself exists, the greater the hope in my own heart becomes. So thanks to Michael for that as well. Check out the YK Records whole catalog. Uncle Skeleton, who sort of started the thing off in the first place, you might want to listen to. More recently, there's an amazing new music from Bleary and also Fetching Pails, the website for that, which I am now Googling. You're supposed to know the website before you start doing the pod. It's ykrecords.com. I was like, I'll just guess and I'll be right. And I could have, but I second guessed myself at the last minute. ykrecords.com is where you can find new music from Bleary, from Fetching Pails, classics from Uncle Skeleton, and way more stuff. And I really recommend you do it whether you're in Nashville or not. And listen, if you are in Nashville or if you ever go to Nashville, next time you do so, check out the indie rock world. There's a lot more going on there than maybe is widely known. And I, for one, was very glad to hear about it. I hope you were too. So yeah, that's a huge thanks to Michael Eades. I'd love to get him back on the show at some point. He's just, he's one of us, So we'll figure out a part 2 of Michael Eades down the road a ways. That's a Nashville promise. For now, though, that's this episode of Major Label Debut. Thank you for listening, as always. Thanks for sticking around. We got our listeners, we got our core. Like everything with the internet and with promoting things, the podcast we're always trying to grow it wider and get it to new ears. And so if you know anyone who you think might be interested in this conversation with Michael Eades or any of our other wonderful conversations, please feel free to pass the pod on to a friend, relative, well-wisher, or enemy. And in the meantime, we just thank you so much for sticking around. It means a lot to me personally and to the whole team, which is John Paul Bullock and Josh Hook, our wonderful producers. Love you guys. And Greg Alsop, who did our theme music. He's the best. My name's Graham Wright. Thank you for listening to Major Label Debut. We will return with more tales from the intersection of art and commerce. Until then, take it easy.